Good morning, Mutiara. It's really nice to finally meet you, even though it's through an online platform. We reviewed your application beforehand and we found your background quite interesting, especially your exposure to analytical chemistry practice and laboratory work. Before we begin the interview, how are you today? Is everything clean on your side, your connection, audio, and everything else?
Good morning, Mrs. Siti and Mrs. Shafina. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm doing well today, and everything is clear on my side. I do feel a bit nervous, but at the same time, I'm very excited to be here and to have this discussion with both of you.
That's completely understandable, so please don't worry too much about it. We actually prepared this session to feel like a discussion rather than a formal interrogation. So feel free to express your thoughts openly. We're interested not only in your knowledge, but also in how you think, communicate, and approach problems.
Alright, Mutiara, let's start by talking about your background. I've read your CV and I can see that you have been involved in several laboratory activities related to analytical chemistry. However, I believe a CV only shows a summary, not the full story behind it. So, I'd like you to tell us more about yourself in your own words. How you become interested in chemistry, what kind of experience shape your skill, and how those experience prepare you for a professional role in an analytical laboratory.
Thank you, Mrs. Siti. My name is Mutiara, and I'm currently a student focusing on analytical chemistry. My interest in chemistry started from my curiosity about how substances interact and how we can measure and understand those interactions scientifically. During my academic journey, I have been involved in several laboratory experiments such as gravimetric analysis, determination of pKa, and basic spectroscopic techniques. Through this experience, I developed not only technical skills, but also an appreciation for precision and attention to detail. What I enjoy the most is the analytical process, interpreting data, identifying possible errors, and understanding the chemical principles behind the results. I also learned that working in laboratory requirements discipline, patience, and responsibility. In addition, I have worked in group based projects where collaboration and communication were very important. This experience helped me improve my ability to work in a team and handle responsibilities effectively.
That's a very truthful explanation, and I like how you emphasized both technical and personal growth. In a real laboratory environment, especially in industry, the ability to reflect on your work is just as important as performing the experiment itself. Let me ask you something more specific. Among all your laboratory experience, which one do you think contribute the most to your development, not only in terms of technical skills, but also in shaping your mindset and problem-solving ability?
One experience that had a strong impact on me was during a gravimetric analysis experiment. At a time, I struggled to obtain a constant weight because the sample still contained moisture. Initially, I felt confused and slightly frustrated because the results were inconsistent. However, instead of giving up, I tried to evaluate each step of the procedure and discuss it with my teammates. Eventually, I realized that the drying process was not optimal. So, I repeated the process by ensuring proper heating in the oven and cooling in the in sorry and cooling in a desiccator before weighing. After applying this correction, I successfully obtained a constant wake. From that experience, I learned the importance of patience and attention to detail and following procedures carefully in laboratory work.
That's a very good example. What I appreciate the most is that you did just focus on the mistake, but also on how you analyze it and improve the situation. That kind of mindset is very valuable in professional settings. Now, I'd like to move to another aspect in teamwork, especially in laboratory environment. People often have different working styles, and sometimes conflict can happen. Could you share an experience where you faced a disagreement within a team and how you handle it in a constructive way?
Yes, I have experienced that during a group assignment. At one point, there was a disagreement about how to divide the text. Some members felt that the workload was not distributed fairly. Instead of ignoring the situation, I tried to initiate a discussion where everyone could express their opinions. I listened carefully to each perspective and tried to find a middle ground. In the end, we agreed to divide the text based on each person's strengths and availability. This made the workflow more efficient and reduced tension within the team. From that experience, I learned that communication, empathy, and fairness are very important in maintaining good teamwork.
Thank you, Mutiara. I really like how you explain your experience in a structured and reflective way. That's something we highly value, especially in analytical chemistry, where unexpected results are quite common. Now, I don't like to explore your technical understanding a bit more, but don't worry, I'm not looking for perfect textbook answers. I am more interested in how you think and explain concepts. Let's start with something fundamental. Why do you think sample preparation is considered one of the most critical steps in analytical chemistry, even before the actual measurement is performed?
Sample preparation is a very critical step in analytical chemistry because it directly affects the accuracy and reliability of the results. If the sample is not prepared properly, it might contain impurities or interference that can affect the measurement. For example, in spectroscopic analysis, impurities can alter the absorbance value. Proper sample preparation ensures that the analyte is in the correct form, concentration, and condition for analysis. It also helps improve precision and reproducibility.
That's a strong explanation. I especially like that you mentioned interference because in real laboratory situation, samples are rarely ideal. Let me give you a scenario. Suppose you are working in a laboratory and you consistently obtain results that are slightly off from expect values, not completely wrong, but not accurate either. How would you approach the situation step by step to identify whether the issue comes from the sample preparation, the instrument, or even human error?
In that situation, I would first review the entire procedure step by step to identify possible source of error. I would start by checking the sample preparation process, ensuring that all steps were performed correctly and consistently. Then, I would verify whether the instruments were properly calibrated and functioning well. Next, I would perform replicate measurements to see if the results are consistent. If inconsistencies persist, I would consider the possibility of human error and review my techniques. Finally, I would compare the results with standard reference or control samples to validate the accuracy.
That's exactly the kind of systematic thinking we're looking for. Now, now let's move to analytical techniques. You mentioned chromatography in your studies. Instead of just defining it, I'd like you to compare gas chromatography and liquid chromatography from a practical perspective. For example, in a real laboratory situation, how would you decide which method to use? What factors would you consider?
The main difference between gas chromatography and liquid chromatography lies in the mobile phase use. Gas chromatography uses a gas as the mobile phase and is suitable for volatile and thermally stable compounds. On the other hand, liquid chromatography uses a liquid solvent and is more suitable for non-volatile or thermally unstable compounds. In practice, the choice depends on the nature of the sample, such as its volatility, stability, and molecular properties.
That's a very practical explanation, and I appreciate that you considered real world factors. Before we close the technical part, I'd like to ask one last question. In your understanding, what does quality control mean in daily laboratory practice, not just as a concept, but as consistent action performed by a chemist?
Quality control in daily laboratory practice means ensuring that every step of the analysis is performed correctly and consistently to produce reliable results. This includes calibrating instruments regularly, following standard operating procedures, using control samples, and performing repeated measurements. It also involves proper documentation and critical evaluation of results to detect any error or inconsistencies.
Before we close, I'd like to ask one final question. When you imagine yourself working in an industrial laboratory, what do you think will be your biggest challenge and how do you plan to overcome it?
I believe my biggest challenge would be adapting to a fast-paced and highly demanding work environment. To overcome this, I plan to constantly learn and ask for feedback on improve my skills and also believe that maintaining discipline and willingness to adapt will help me grow professionally.
That's a very honest answer. Leslie, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
In the next 5 years, I see myself becoming a skilled analytical chemist who is capable of performing accurate and reliable analysis. I also hope to contribute to improving laboratory process and continue to developing both my technical and professional skills.
Thank you very much, Mutiara. It was a very insightful discussion.
Yes, we really enjoyed speaking with you today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We will contact you soon. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.